If you're going to San Francisco.
It is August 8th, 2010. We are in Virginia Beach, Virginia, interviewing Gordon Bergstresser. Gordon's birth date is March 9th, 1947. My name is Bethany Bergstresser, daughter of Gordon Bergstresser. Gordon, what war and branch of service did you serve?
I served in Vietnam in the U.S. Army Infantry Division.
What was your rank?
First lieutenant.
Where did you serve?
I served in Vietnam near the Cambodian border out of Long Binh.
Segment 2. Jogging Memory. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Yes. I was about to be drafted, so I enlisted and went to Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in Birmingham, Alabama.
Why did you join?
I joined because I was about to have my draft number called and wanted to serve as an officer.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
Because I wanted to have the opportunities of different, what they called MOSs, which was your occupation in the service, and the Army had more of those.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yes.
What did it feel like?
The first days in service were pretty intimidating. We were sworn in as Army privates and were then sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training.
Tell me about your boot camp and training experience.
Well, boot camp was pretty hard. They exercised you a lot, made you run a lot. You were intimidated by the drill sergeants. Lasted for 8 weeks. And then after that, we were sent to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where we went through advanced infantry training. And then after that, was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia for Officer Candidate School.
Do you remember your instructors?
I don't remember their names, but I remember impressions. The drill sergeants were very intimidating. The instructions in the different classes was very thorough.
How did you get through it?
Well, I got through it because I wanted to become an officer. So even in OCS, there was a 50% dropout rate. But halfway through, we pretty much knew that we would either not make it or get through it. And I felt pretty confident at that point that I would make it.
What was OCS like compared to boot camp?
Oh, OCS was probably the most demanding physical and mental thing I've ever done. When I went to OCS, I weighed 205 pounds. When I got out, I weighed 170. Didn't get very much sleep. Continued to go through instruction all day and then training at night, and probably for a total of 6 months, averaged maybe 4.5 hours of sleep a night.
Segment 3, experiences. Which war did you serve in?
I served in the Vietnam War.
Where exactly did you go?
Most of my time was in the Cambodian theater. Not many U.S. citizens knew that we were that active in Cambodia, but there was a lot of action of the North Vietnamese Army supplying their recruits in Vietnam, so only several companies were put into Cambodia. And so for a period of 12 months I was in the jungle 100% of the time.
Do you remember arriving and what it was like?
Yes, I remember arriving at Ben Hoa Air Base in Vietnam, and when they opened the front door of the aircraft, it was the hottest and most humid place that I've ever remembered. And then we were got off the plane, we were processed through, we were assigned to our companies and our platoons, and probably within probably 2 weeks of arriving in country, I was sent to Fire Base Mace and got my platoon and went out into the jungle.
What was your job / assignment?
My job was to lead an infantry platoon and to track down and kill the enemy.
What was your specific role?
Well, my specific role was First Lieutenant Infantry Platoon Leader. I had about 25, maybe 20 people in my platoon, and we would receive our orders and mission every several days, and we would head out on the direction that we were told to go, and went through the jungle and tried to find the North Vietnamese Army.
What was your schedule like?
I didn't have a schedule. I mean, my schedule was to get up at sunrise and find a place where we could camp out right before sunset.
What about your longer term schedule?
My what schedule?
Your more general longer term.
Well, the longer term schedule was to just serve in the jungle and lead a platoon.
How many days?
How many days did I?
How many days in the jungle and how many breaks?
Well, what we would do, I was with the 1st Air Cav, and so what we would do would be to go on usually 21-day missions. We would leave the fire base, helicopter in, go fan out into the jungle, look around, try to find trails, try to find the North Vietnamese places where they lived and hid. And after 21 days, usually we get picked up by a helicopter and go back to the fire base, take 3 days off, and then do the same thing over.
Did you see combat?
Yeah.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
I did not have anybody killed in my platoon. I had 3 people wounded, but in my company a couple people were killed. But we were pretty successful in keeping people alive.
Can you explain some of those incidences where people were wounded?
Well,
killed?
one specific instance was a battle along a riverbed where we suspected as we were moving toward the water that they were around us, but when we got closer to the water, the platoon to my right flank took fire. We circled back in to help support, but by that time they had lost a couple guys. But that was probably the longest and most deadliest battle we were in.
And how did you feel during that time? Do you remember your reaction, or?
Your reaction is one of you remember your training. You're not afraid. You just know what you have to do, and you try to get the upper hand on the enemy and kill them. And we just put as much firepower out there as you can, and gradually you usually prevail. They were not as tactically equivalent as we were, so you usually could drive them back.
Did you ever fear for your life?
Oh, I feared for my. I wasn't as scared. I wasn't afraid. In fact, I was probably looking for fights as a way of serving, which I thought was the best way to do that. I think after you are done, after the battle is over, or after the encounter is over, you might be a little bit afraid, but not during the battle.
What was it like living in the jungle?
The jungle was wet all the time. Any little cut or nick usually resulted in an infection. For 12 solid months, I can remember not having a piece of dry clothing on me. Leeches were bad. Dirt, just dirt and grime all the time, really.
Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Well, the battle that I mentioned previously was one. The most memorable experiences was the fact that even though I had a platoon of a cross-section of Americana, everybody came together. They knew what they had to do. People had varying emotions, but everybody did their job.
Continuing on segment 3.
Yeah, continuing on experiences, I was mainly focused on combat experiences, but part of the combat experiences included the fact that when I first took my platoon out into the jungle, my first mission, being a young lieutenant, I didn't know much better than just to lay out my poncho and sleep at night. We usually took your shirt off because it was so hot. That I remember that first night, maybe it was the second night, looking down onto my chest because I felt something crawling there, and I looked down and there was a bamboo viper just looking at me. So the only thing you could do was just freeze. Hopefully the thing would move off as opposed to get intimidated. And it gradually did, so as soon as it got off, I jumped up, stood up the rest of the night, and that was it. And another day later, we were getting resupplied. I had to bring out a hammock, and I never slept on the ground again. In addition to that, there was an experience, what was I going to say?
Helicopter.
Oh, the helicopter ride. The helicopter ride. This was probably several months into the tour, and it was common that when you went into what they called an LZ, which was a landing zone, you didn't know whether it was you were going to pick up rifle fire on the ground or whether it was going to be safe. So the way to get an edge on that was to sit right on the edge of the helicopter blade and be able to get off the helicopter quickly, because you had several people behind you that needed to get off as well. Well, as we were coming in, the helicopter pilot banked to the left or right, I don't recall which way, but it was the wrong way. And I was almost totally out of the helicopter before somebody grabbed my backpack, pulled me back in. Otherwise, I would have fallen probably 2,000 feet to the ground, and that would have been it for old Gordon. So that was a memorable experience as well.
Was that the scariest moment of your life?
Well, yeah, I think the scariest moments when you're taking fire and you're not quite sure where it was coming from. Once you figured out where it was coming from, then you're okay. But when you had no idea where it was, those are the scary moments.
Were you ever a prisoner of war?
No, I was not, nor was anybody in my platoon.
When you had your breaks, where did you go?
Well, it was part of the first CAS policy that every, I think it was 28 or 35 days, they rotated you to the southern part of Vietnam for 2 or 3 days of relaxation. It was a town called Vung Tau, where it was, everybody letting their hair down and having a good time. As far as my R&R, I went to Bangkok for a week and then came back to my platoon.
And what was it like when you were on your breaks?
The breaks were fine. Everybody enjoyed the breaks because they knew that when they went back into the jungle, it would be all serious business and back to fighting for them. So the breaks were a welcome breather.
Do you have any memorable experiences from those times on breaks living in Asia?
Well, yeah, I mean, the breaks were memorable. They were fun. They were rowdy. They were relaxing. And so every one of the breaks, even though there aren't any specifics that you want to tell a story about, they were fun.
Did you make friends with any native Vietnamese?
Well, each platoon had a guide